everyone. Welcome to the rebroadcast of the original Design Journal number 13. Last time we had some awful technical problems that led to a jittery image and people not being able to hear well and all sorts of other problems. So I'm redoing it today. This is Memorial Day in the United States, which means probably anyone that would be listening here is out barbecuing with their family right now. But I'm here all the same. Oh, looks like Heath is here. So hi, Heath. Good to see you. And I'm going to be going through today a few different things. First off, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what I've been working on. We're going to talk also about what we're going to be doing next. And then we are also going to be digging in a little bit on using a scene from a film to help us sort of guide our development process. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about first is something that's come up. Folks have been asking, where's our pre-alpha play test that we were supposed to be starting over the last week? Well, about that, I spent a ton of time putting together that content. And every time I finished, it was not worth testing. I mean, just bluntly, it was coming out so vanilla and it was coming out so exactly like everything else that's already been out before. It really just wasn't worth us spending time on, quite frankly. I'm trying to take into account the things from the survey and the conversations on Discord and the feedback from the writers or the consulting designers. But I got to say that going forward with these sort of base D20, bell curve 3D6 systems, at their basic level, there wasn't a lot there that was anything new. Now, when I say this, I'm not saying we're going to throw out those as options, because honestly, they still might be the best options, and I'll talk more about that. But in from basic mechanic point of view, there's not a lot to test there that does anything that hasn't already been done. And so what I wanted to do was I put on the brakes and said, look, we're not going to head down a road where we waste people's time and we're not doing anything of value. I put on the brakes, and what I'm going to end up doing is I will end up calling in our consulting designers. I actually had a graphic specially designed for this. Here you go. This is me calling in the consulting designers to assist us with our problems that we've run into here, to jump in here with our cool name goes here light, to call them in to help us. So what I'm going to be doing is taking some of the basic ideas that we've got. I'm going to take the core activity that we wrote up, which very clearly states what it is we're trying to achieve here. I'm going to put these two things together and send them out a request to offer us their feedback on what we can do. Now, let me talk a little bit about dice mechanics. We've talked about a ton of different mechanics. And when I ran into this wall of saying we're not really doing anything different here, because look, if people want to play 5th edition, they can play 5th edition. If they want to design for 5th edition, under the current setup, they can design for 5th edition. That's really not an issue anymore, right? With the Creative Commons license. Kobold Press is already making a 5.5 5th edition game, right? Pathfinder already exists. There are games out there that do what D&D does already. We don't need to make a different free version of that. And we've never wanted to reskin it in the first place. So one of the first things I did is went back to basics, and I pulled out a huge stack of books. I wish I had them here to show you. I went through 40 different games and identified what their core mechanics were and walked through how they were designed, how they handled different levels of degrees of success, how they handled dice mechanics, and looked at all the different options that are available, and really realized that it kind of breaks down to some pretty basic options to begin with. Now, if we want to completely break the mold, we could do something totally different. I think Mazes is a great example of a game that does something totally different, right? They've got 4 dice types, and you give 1 dice type to each player. And each of those players can only use that dice type. And then they have all these cool systems for, where you're liable to fall in your dice rolls for different types of characters. So say the learned character uses the D4, but 2, 3, 4 is what they need to roll. So if I'm a fighter rolling a D10, it's less likely to hit those. Very cool stuff, but it kind of sends us off into a brand new area, and we'd have to do everything from scratch. Another key thing about this is that we need to make this something that people can design for, right? This is a key element of Cool Name Goes Here, is being able to design for it, to be able to use modular pieces to make it interesting and different and creative. And so one of the big things that I wanted to look at is making sure we have a core foundation that allows that. And where we were going would allow it, but let me see how I can put it. The challenge I'm having is saying that, the reality is that if we're using a basic dice system, there's nothing to play test. We've all play tested 3D6 and D20 and even 2D10 to the extreme, right? We know how that plays out. We know how it plays out against a straight target number. So that's why I brought everything to a stop. That's why I went back to it. We may still end up going with one of those dice mechanics because it does allow us to have a lot of flexibility to build out. Other dice mechanics do not necessarily allow that. There are a lot of really cool dice mechanics out there. Blades in the Dark has some very cool stuff. Numenera's got cool stuff. Across the board, we've got games doing cool things. But the question is can we offer a lot of fidelity? In other words, high detail into how you can expand out from there. And so that's where we need to make sure that we're using the right mechanic. And that's why I'm going to go to our consulting designers. So what I'm going to do is go to them. And I'm going to start out with a few basic options. Say, look, maybe we do this, maybe we do this, or maybe we do this. One of the maybes is going to be a roll 3D6 or 2D10 or D20 against a target number. Flat out, classic gaming design style. This is one of our options. Another option is going to be, do we have a dice pool system, right? I know that there's been a lot of plus and minuses about dice pools. People worry about dice pools. People have had bad experiences with dice pools, right? But a dice pool system is pretty cool because it allows you to have a graduated system of mechanics or of successes where you can have one success does one thing, but you can burn additional successes to do other cool stuff, right? This is also a very cool thing. It's also very easy then to manage things like burning fatigue to get additional successes or things like that, to let the player have some levers that they can pull to manage how the story goes. So I'm going to offer them something like that to take a look at. And then I'm still working on something in the middle that I'm playing with a little bit, but I haven't quite worked out. I'm going to offer these three things to them and say, look, here's what we're trying to figure out. Not which one of these three to use, but if we want the style of game we want, which is this somewhat pulpy, right? Sword and sorcery, down-to-earth heroes, having cool adventures, maybe getting hurt along the way, struggling a little bit here and there. And I'll talk about this in my example I give in a few minutes here. If we want to do this, what system's going to work best for that? What system's going to keep the gameplay fast? What system is going to allow people to build on it? Because that's a huge part of our game, is people being able to build on it. Based on their experience, which of these mechanics are going to let us do that? Or is there something that we need to do totally different? Or if we do use one of these mechanics, what do we need to keep in mind while we're doing it so that this works, right? So those are the things that I want to be able to talk to these consulting designers about, work with them a little bit. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about, just to share a little of what I've done. I've got a notebook filled with my notes from everything that I've done. Tell you some of the games that I've been looking at. Went through Tales from the Loop. Very cool system. Success-based dice pool. Basically, you're adding together your skill dice and your attribute dice, and you're rolling them. Classic success-based. Very cool. Looked at The Witcher. The Witcher has an interesting system, which is like D10 plus your attribute plus your skill against difficulties of like 10 to 30, with 10 being easy. That was kind of cool. I liked that one. And that's one that I'd like to say that when we start talking about a basic sort of classic mechanic against a target number, I love the add up. They just add more stuff to it until you get your final result. I think that's pretty cool. What that does do is it's interesting because it makes a lot of things automatic, right? Because you're adding together these attributes and skills. These attributes could be between like 1 and 13. You have your skills as well. It's interesting because you end up with these automatic successes. And we've been talking about that, about how that's not a bad thing, right? That's an okay thing. The End of the World games from Fantasy Flight Games, looked at that one as well. That one had some very interesting mechanics in there as well. Adding different dice in as you go along, a dice pool. One Ring, of course, I looked at, which is very cool, which is a target number of the difficulty equals 20 minus your attribute. So you're actually building the target number off of your attribute. That's one of the systems that are out there that we see a lot of. GURPS does this. Games where you have to roll your attribute or lower. Well, they changed it up by doing 20 and then subtracting your attribute to get the number so you could roll up, right? Because rolling under is something that people struggle with. But the One Ring does some very cool stuff there. But I looked at Eclipse Phase, the new G.I. Joe game, the new Avatar game, The Expanse, Apocalypse World, Cortex, Altered Carbon, Exalted, Earth Dawn, second edition or first edition. That's the one I wanted to look at. Shadowrun second edition, Dangerous Journey, Sovereign Stone. I pulled out a lot of old stuff because I wanted to make sure we're not leaving stuff on the table. Alternity, Kids on Bikes, GURPS, the new Doctor Who, Traveler, Symboborium, RuneQuest, Numenera, Blades in the Dark, Dungeon World, Mjork Biori. I mean, I pulled out everything. And I read through this stuff and I looked at every single mechanic out there. And at the end of the day, this is where I'm going to be turning to our consulting designers, taking the information we've got, taking these sort of base ideal mechanics. And basically, you can split most of games down into either a roll plus an attribute modifier plus a skill modifier versus a target number, or roll against a target number and count successes. Pretty much every game boils down to that. So we'll see what they have to say. So on Friday or on Thursday this week, which we'll have it very soon after this one, maybe we'll already have some feedback. We'll see how much time folks have to work on this because they're not going to have a ton of time yet. Otherwise, we'll talk about it next week and get into that a little bit. So anyway, that's the status. Yes, we are making progress, but no, I'm not going to move forward with something that doesn't use our time well. That's one of my roles. My role as game master for this crazy project is that I do have to be the person who slams on the brakes and goes, no, we're heading the wrong direction. And I think that in terms of sharing what it's like to do this design, to build a game like this, I think the thing that you run into is that there are some pretty frightening moments where you wonder to yourself, can I do this? Can I even get this done? I don't know that I can, right? I literally sat there for a minute thinking, what have I done? What have I mean, I don't really know how to get us through this challenge because I'm looking at all these games and they're all the same and ours is turning out the same and wondering whether we're wasting everyone's time. There are really tough moments where you have to stop and take a step back and just say, okay, reset. What is it we're trying to achieve? And this is why all those tome of requirements, and I've got this manifesto I put together. It's a shortened version. That's why these are so important, because when you have to stop and reset, you have to look at those and make sure you know what you're trying to get to. And it helps you to pick a way through there. And fortunately, we've got these consulting designers who are amazing, will be able to help us work our way through this. So we'll work on that. So now I'm going to go into something a little bit more fun here. All right. So this is something that I did during the first version of this before everything went wrong. But one of the things that I like to do is I sit down and I watch films that capture the essence of the type of game that we've decided we want to make, right? Indiana Jones is a great example of this style of game. We've got, and hang on here, let me just bring up this the document here. To remind you all, I think I can fit this into one text post, but we'll see. I'm not sure if it'll let me have this many words, but I'll put what I can here. Here we go. Down-to-earth heroes with a handful of exceptional abilities travel to wondrous places for action-packed adventures where they risk life and limb, negotiating obstacles, overcoming challenges, and vanquishing deadly foes to accomplish extraordinary goals. So this sort of adventure fits the idea of Indiana Jones really well. All right. He is a down-to-earth hero. He's not Superman. He doesn't even have superpowers, although you would argue that he does have a handful of exceptional abilities, right? He knows how to make his way through temples. He does some pretty awesome acrobatic moves now and then to get away from the bad guys. He's not a bad fighter, right? He's got some exceptional abilities. He knows about ancient history and can use that to his benefit. But he's still a normal guy. And that's kind of what we wanted to go for our basis of this game. He also travels to wondrous places And that's important to us, is that you go from your somewhat boring home to someplace that's fantastic. To have action-packed adventures, absolutely, where he risks life and limb. He gets hurt all the time. The poor guy gets battered and beaten and exhausted throughout. He makes it through, but it's not without bumps and bruises and scratches along the way. Negotiating obstacles, overcoming challenges, etc., for extraordinary goals, right? An extraordinary goal might be finding an ancient artifact that everyone thought was lost. So let's look at the opening of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Most of you know this, so that's why I'm using this as an example, because as I describe it, you'll know what's happening. If you don't know this, please just stop watching this and go watch Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, it's fantastic. Why have you not watched it yet? So let's go do it. It opens in the jungle right away, because most of the people viewing this aren't living in a jungle. This is a wondrous location. It's strange animals that aren't familiar, environments that maybe people aren't used to seeing. It's a very rich environment. And then not only that, we're in a temple, an ancient ruined temple, all overgrown. Now, one of the first things I'd like to do in this game is come up with a system that allows us to present that as a character of sorts, because that whole idea of a wondrous location has to be more than just lip service, right? We can't just say it's wonderful. Wondrous. We have to show the players that it's wondrous. We have to make it strange and impactful to the players. And so what do? Maybe we have certain modifiers to healing rolls, or maybe there are certain types of environmental effects that come into play, right? There are things that we can do to make it an interesting and special environment all its own. Same with the temple itself, right? Darkness, for example, is a somewhat wondrous effect, because most of the time we have lights, but in a temple, there's no lighting, right? Ancient temple, ruined, you've got to have a torch or something. So sure enough, Indiana Jones and his friend, I think it's Alfred Molina, which I don't remember what the character's name is, but that's who I always think about. I actually think about him as Dr. Octopus, but we won't say that. So Indy and Molina going through the temple. Indiana Jones stops just for no clear reason. And we're going to skip the spiders. He stops for no clear reason. He clearly instantly made a check, a perception check of some kind, spotted something. And what he spotted was a trap. He didn't have to roll for it. He didn't have to work hard to figure out it was there. He knew it was there. And when Molina's like, going, what? I don't have this extraordinary ability. Why did you stop me? He shows him the spikes that pop out with the skull on it and the skeleton of the last victim. So this is interesting, because it immediately sort of indicates that there's a way that we can create a rule set that allows characters with the right extraordinary ability to be able to do things without having to roll. There is no real chance. And keeping in mind that Indiana Jones also has lots of time. He's not in a rush. He's taking his time. He's being cautious. All of these things could play into allowing this to be an automatic result. Now, he needs to find his way around it. Again, no trouble. He somehow knows how to do this. He knows traps. He makes his way around it and continues on. Next up, they have this pit, right? They got to get across this pit. Well, he's got a tool for that. So we need to have rules for these tools. Whips it up there, gets it over the stick, and he can swing across the pit. Now, in terms of the game, there needs to be good design around allowing people to find the things that allow the GM to say yes. So if the person says, I want to whip my whip up and use it to swing across the pit, if we block them on that, we're going to undermine sort of their storytelling, their creativity. We want to find ways to say yes. But he's going to say, like, yeah, you can go ahead and do that. It's going to be relatively easy for you. Indy swings it up, no problem, swings across. This is his normal stuff. He does it all the time. Molina, however, is not this guy. So when he throws the whip back, he rolls across. He clearly got a failed roll, right? That's a pure no on the scale. He rolls it, he fails. So what does he do? Well, he's about to fall, and Indy reaches out and grabs him. This is a place where we talked about wanting people to play as a team, to play as a group. Perfect example. How does Indy do this? He didn't just lend him a dice to his roll because he failed the roll. We all saw him fail the roll, but Indy was able to reach out and use his own abilities, perhaps a dice pool of his own, to alter the results and grab hold of him and pull him back. Now, He was still able to do that, but the best he could manage, if you look at degrees of success, is a yes but result. Yes, he saved him, but we see the branch start to crack. So the next time through, we know it's going to be harder. But at the same time, we keep moving forward. Now, note that all of this has been tension. We're building tension that leads to action. And I think that that's important. It's a constant flow of encounters and moments. There's not a bunch of time wandering through hallways going like, there's nothing here. Let's go check the next corner, right? We have a story that moves us through. It would be nice for us to be able to have a mechanic that allows these tension moments to keep building the tension without breaking it with moments of boredom along the way, right? How do we do that? That's going to be part of our challenge. You continue forward. Now Indy stops again. He's got a bad feeling about this. He's going to have to make a roll of some kind in order to be successful at figuring out that there's a trap at this location. So he looks around. We know what it is. You step on the thing, the darts fly out. He doesn't know yet. But he's very good at this. He takes his time. He makes his roll. He figures out what's going on. He triggers it to show Molina, and the darts fly out. Got it. I have to be careful, he thinks. I got to step on the right blocks. He needs to figure out how to get across the blocks. Makes another roll, this time intellectually working out the logic. And he bounces across, no problem at all, and reaches the other side. Tells Molina to stay behind. Probably a smart idea, right? You just wait here. I'll go get the idol. So he gets to the idol, and now yet another trap. This time, this is the big moment. The tension has been building up to here. Few chances for them to fail along the way. He figures out the trap. He knows how to do it. But when he goes to try to figure it out, he fails. Maybe he used up his dice saving Molina from falling in the pit. We don't know. But somehow he fails on this one and activates the trap accidentally. At this point, he needs to get out of here. And so what we see are them running out of the temple at full speed. They're no longer taking their time. When he has to jump across this trap with all of the pressure plates, he doesn't have time to figure it out. He doesn't have that time element that we talked about him being able to use to get across. This time he has to just push through with sheer strength and speed. So that's probably a role for that. He might actually have to use some fatigue to get across because it's so important for him to succeed. If he fails, that boulder that's coming, he's going to be done. So he runs across it as fast as he can. He races up. He finally gets to the pit. And sure enough, we all know what happens. Molina swings across the pit on his turn. He rolls. We know he already is bad at this. He gets a yes, but on his roll. So yes, he makes it across, but he breaks the branch that holds the whip. So bad news, now there's no way across the pit. So Indy gets there and he's like, throw me the whip. We know how it goes. He won't throw him the whip. He takes off running. He throws him the idol, doesn't throw him the whip, takes off running. Now Indy's got to get across. So now he has to do another physical feat. Runs as fast as he can, rolls his dice to make it across. I think he failed because if you look how he grabbed the lip of that pit, that's very much a yes, but. Yes, you reach the pit, other side, but you don't land on your feet. So he probably burned a couple more fatigue to get up there and clamber up over the edge of the pit. Keeps running, comes across the spike trap, which is set off and with Molina in it, because obviously he didn't have a clue. And when he got to it, he tried to roll to repeat the process of getting around it and failed because he doesn't have the extraordinary skills that Indy does. Runs through and gets out the other side, collapses, only to be confronted by Belloc, I think his name is, standing there with his pistol and all of his companions with their bows, pinning Indy down. Now, what's interesting is that we watch Indy sit for a few minutes. He stalls. He stalls a lot. Why does he stall? Because he burned all that fatigue getting out of the tunnel, running as fast as he could. Burned his fatigue making those jumps across the pit. He needs to recover. So now we have a recovery action. So he sits there, he recovers, he gets his energy back. And at the moment that Belloc and his followers are all distracted, Indy makes a run for it. He uses that moment of advantage to run for it. Then we have a final chase to the plane. Indy leaps on the plane, they fly away, and thus we end our scene. Very cool moment, but it's something we can absolutely create. We've got an introduction to a wondrous location. We've got building tension leading up to an action sequence. We've got a pulse pounding action as he tries to get out of it. And then we have a moment between action sequences where the character takes a moment to sort of catch their breath, get their bearings, and then the action begins again. This is what we want to be able to capture, and I know that we can do it. And looking at the dice mechanics, we can find a way to make this work and make it work well, but we have to make sure that we're not just regurgitating the same old thing. There has to be that extra element, some other angle to it. Maybe we do it with fatigue. Maybe we do it with an action pool. Maybe we do it with a different type of die. I don't know yet, and that's what we need to work out, where I'm getting advice from our designers on. And I think that we're going to get some very cool feedback on this one. So that's all I've got to say to you this week, folks. Sorry that I had to do this again. For those of you who watched it once before and are watching this one, sorry for any repeats, but that previous recording was just no good, so I needed to repeat it. Thanks to Heath for hanging out with me today, and the couple of other people who are here watching. And in the meantime, I'm going to keep designing. I'm going to keep reading rule books and looking at different options, and I'm going to get those notes out to our consulting designers. And hopefully by Thursday, we might even start to have some results. So thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon. And if you're here in the U.S., enjoy your beautiful day.